The cargo deck of the Meridian station hummed with the usual cacophony of 100 different species conducting trade. Anna wiped her hands on her maintenance coveralls, watching the crowd with practiced caution. At 8 years old, she'd learned to stay close to Jack, her guardian. Whenever they ventured into the station's busier sections, Jack leaned against a support beam, his weathered face impassive as he negotiated fuel prices with a Kickstar merchant. The insectoid creature's mandibles clicked irritably, clearly unhappy with Jack's counteroffer. But that was standard procedure. Humans had a reputation for driving hard bargains. What most species didn't know was that humans also had a reputation for something else entirely. Anna tugged on Jack's sleeve. "I'm going to look at the ship models," she said, pointing to a vendor 3 stalls down. Jack's eyes followed her gesture, calculating distances and exit routes in a heartbeat. "Stay where I can see you. 5 minutes." She nodded and skipped toward the display, her blonde ponytail bouncing. The Trilaxian vendor chittered a greeting, its 3 eyes blinking in sequence. Anna pressed her nose against the transparent case, marveling at the miniature vessels suspended in anti-grav fields. That's when the Chromath Patrol arrived. 4 of them, each standing nearly 3 meters tall, their scaled hides gleaming under the station lights. They moved with the swagger of enforcers who'd forgotten what enforcement actually meant, who'd confused authority with entitlement. The lead Chromath, his crest flared in aggressive display, shoved through the crowd without regard for the smaller species scrambling out of his way. Anna, transfixed by a model of an Earth corvette, didn't see him coming. The Chromath's tail swept sideways, catching her shoulder and sending her sprawling across the deck. The impact wasn't malicious, she was simply too small, too insignificant to notice. The model case shattered, and Anna's cry of pain was drowned out by the Chromath's booming laughter as his companions joined him. Jack's head snapped around at the sound. For a moment, the cargo deck seemed to hold its breath. Experienced traders recognized the shift in atmosphere, the way the temperature seemed to drop despite the environmental controls maintaining perfect stasis. The Kickstar merchant took 3 steps backward, his primary arms raised in a warding gesture. Jack crossed the distance in 4 strides. "Anna," he said quietly, kneeling beside her. Blood trickled from a scrape on her elbow and tears streamed down her face. He examined her shoulder with gentle, efficient movements. Nothing broken, but she'd have bruises. His hands, calloused from years of shipwork, were impossibly tender as he helped her to her feet. The lead Chromath glanced down, finally noticing the child he'd struck. His translator rendered his words with lazy contempt. "The human spawn should learn to watch where it stands." Perhaps he never finished the sentence. Jack stood slowly, placing himself between Anna and the Chromath Patrol. When he spoke, his voice was conversational, almost pleasant. "You struck a child under my protection." The Chromath's crest flared wider. "Your protection means nothing here, human. This is Chromath sector, and you—" "I know exactly where we are," Jack interrupted, his tone unchanged. "And I know Chromath law. Article 7 of the Station Treaty. Any being who causes deliberate harm to another's dependent forfeits the protection of peace protocols." "Deliberate?" The Chromath's laughter boomed again. "I barely touched the creature. If humans are so fragile, they shouldn't—" Jack's hand moved to his belt and the cargo deck erupted into chaos as vendors and traders scrambled for cover. From a worn leather pouch he withdrew what appeared to be a small cylindrical device. With a quick motion, he activated it and tossed it onto the deck between himself and the Chromath Patrol. The holographic projection materialized instantly, a perfect 3-dimensional recording of the last 30 seconds, showing the Chromath's tail strike with crystal clarity. More importantly, it showed the half-second where the lead Chromath had glanced at Anna before the strike, his eyes tracking her position. "Deliberate," Jack repeated. The Chromath leader's expression shifted, his crest lowering fractionally. Around them, other species had begun to gather at a safe distance. Station law was complicated, but everyone understood the fundamentals. The recording changed everything. "Human," the Chromath said, his translator now carrying a note of caution. "This is a misunderstanding. I will compensate." "No," Jack said simply. He reached to his other hip, and this time, what he drew made the Chromath Patrol take an involuntary step backward. It wasn't a weapon, though several species in the crowd thought it was at first. It was a patch, a simple piece of fabric with an embroidered design. Jack pressed it against his chest and it adhered to his coveralls with a soft click. The design showed a stocky black and white creature with impossibly fierce eyes. Beneath it, in a dozen languages, including Chromath, was a single word: Guardian. "Oh, Void, take us," someone in the crowd whispered. "He's declared." The Chromath understood now. They all did. The Guardian patch was humanity's answer to a galaxy that didn't understand their peculiar brand of ferocity. Most species fought for resources, for territory, for dominance. Humans fought for those things too, but when they fought for their children, they became something else entirely. Jack's expression hadn't changed, but his eyes had. "Station protocols allow for challenge resolution." "You struck my charge. I'm invoking Article 7, Subsection 3. You have 10 seconds to choose, submit to station arbitration and accept their punishment, or face mine." The lead Chromath looked at his companions, then at the growing crowd. Station arbitration would mean fines, possibly imprisonment. But the alternative: humans had been part of the galactic community for 3 generations. In that time, they'd established themselves as skilled traders, talented engineers, and surprisingly effective diplomats. But they'd also established something else, something that made even the warrior races uncomfortable. When humans said, "My turn," they meant it. The Chromath leader's crest folded completely flat against his skull. "Arbitration," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We choose arbitration," Jack nodded once. He deactivated the recording device and picked up Anna, who wrapped her arms around his neck. As he carried her toward the medical station, he paused beside the Chromath leader. "Next time you see a human child," Jack said softly, "remember that somewhere nearby there's someone like me, and we don't bluff." The cargo deck remained silent long after the human and his charge had disappeared into the station's corridors. The Chromath patrol waited with bowed heads for the security detail they knew was coming, and every being present learned the lesson that the galaxy's predators had learned before them. Humans were strange, illogical creatures who valued their young above all else. They might be traders, explorers, or engineers in peaceful times, but threatened their children, and the honey badger showed its teeth.